The name ZIPIT comes from each letter standing for a type of potential problem with your deployment configuration. Z is for zombie, I is for idle, P is for possible impersonator, and T is for trespasser. This is a reasonably small system. It only has one deployment server and 2 indexers. So this is done by using a mashup of the metrics logs from the indexers and the access log from the deployment server. The first thing you need to notice, it says validity of source log data. There must be exactly 2 rows. If you come here and you don't see 2 rows, none of this stuff is valid. I see that we do have a deployment server and we do have some indexers. That's what we need. Since we have 2 rows here, we can proceed down. So it looks at the hosts that are sending data into the indexers and compares them with the hosts that are responding to the deployment server. The hosts have a host name and an IP address both. It looks at both the differences between the IPs and the host names and also the difference between the 2 log sets. The stuff on the left is exactly the same as the stuff on the right except for it's flipped. Let's look at the stuff on the left here, and what we see is green is good. He has no normal. If you look over here, most of these guys look normal. But by this assessment, nothing looks normal over here. But this table contains all of this data, except it's filtered by this. So this filter right now is set to non-normal, non-idle. So this tiny sliver of idle doesn't show up in this table. What I see is that pretty much every client IP has 2 host names. What we found was that one of the indexers has a DNS problem. So we immediately drilled into the fact that this client has a DNS problem on one of these 2 indexers. So he's going to go fix that, and then all of this stuff is going to go green. If I change this filter to show me the idle ones, it's not going to change the pie charts, but it will change the data that's down below. What I see down here is the 2 things it's complaining about are indexers. So what it's telling me is that the 2 indexers are reporting in as deployment clients, but they're not sending any data. This is normal. I'm going to go to the other side now. So we're going to put this back to non-normal, non-idle. And what we see is we've got the vast majority of these actually look okay. I'm going to sort this by count to put this giant one at the bottom, because what we can see then is that we only have 8 exceptions that make up the non-green part of this chart. This first batch, they're all zombies or trespassers, and that designation is given to a server that is sending data in but is not a deployment client. You can see that he has no deployment server host. When I talked to my client, he said those servers were the first ones I put in and they are sending data into my cluster, but I haven't gotten around to making them deployment clients. So this again correctly identified that these servers are not deployment clients, and they should be. This app will work if you have more than 1 deployment server, but in this case these servers are sending data and they don't have any deployment server. This server, when I talked to my client, he said, yeah, that server has 3 different VLANs and 3 different NICs, and he did not nail the Splunk instance down to 1 NIC, so it's actually talking to Splunk through 3 different IP addresses. In this case, my client said, that's perfectly okay, I don't care, and it's not a big deal, but in most data centers, Splunk should be receiving data from a server through a single NIC, or it could be that this is a completely different machine with a misconfigured host name. If the whitelist for your deployment server here is one of these IP addresses, you'll have some problems and maybe some errors in the logs where this server can't communicate to the deployment client when he's using one of these other NICs. So what I typically do is I whitelist the host name and all the NICs on the server, and then I go back and check and see where he's coming in, and if it's the wrong one, I'll fix it, and then I'll remove the NICs where he shouldn't be coming in from the whitelist. But I'd like to make sure he can actually send data in and get deployed. So you just have to be careful if you have multiple identities for your host name that either you lock it down or you expand your whitelist in your deployment server so that your data does get through. In this case, this is the flip side of this problem where all of these were shown as impersonators. The flip side is this one host name is showing up as all of these identities because we have a DNS failure on one of the indexers. So again, this is a proper characterization, and it's something that my client is actually going to go back into his system and fix.